Good morning, everybody. It is true that I am the new forest supervisor for the Bridger Teton, but I used to live here, so I have a lot of um, institutional knowledge and just awareness of this particular area. I left around 2012, but I was here about 8 years or so. So excited to be back and thrilled to be working with the Bridger Teton National Forest again. I want to start by saying I really appreciate the invite. On behalf of the Bridger Teton National Forest, we feel like we're an important part of this community and just thrilled to be part of this dialogue. So thanks for the invitation. In terms of the healthy environment, so I thought about this a little bit, and I thought the first thing we should do is actually really keep in mind how fortunate we are that we have such a rich conservation history here, and the net result of that is a relatively intact ecosystem. We're also very fortunate to have a community that loves and values their public lands, and for the most part does what's right for the environment. However, I don't think we should take history for granted, and we need to be mindful of some troubling trends. Things such as invasive species and disease spread, heat stresses on fisheries, conservation of pollinators, securing winter range and corridors, and just overall demands on our resources, both commodity-based and recreation demands. But all that's a little daunting, and I didn't want to unpack too much, so I thought I'd pick one tangible example we can look at. One that I think involves us all, and those that have been here for a while can certainly relate to. I think it's also a good example of the interconnectedness between our community, our public lands, and our economy. And with that, I do want to bring that one slide up and see if I can pull that off here. All right, I present the Ring of Fire, and I have here my notes to cue the music. Of course, that would be Johnny Cash, but I did not organize that with Jonathan. So maybe during break we can listen to some Johnny Cash music. But let me kind of walk through this. So on the left, what you see is Strava data of winter activities. So Strava, if you don't know, is an app that you can download on your phone. It tracks your progress. You know, things like elevation gain, distance, time, and all that. So that's public information. So that is dictating or identifying where people go in the winter. We know the use is increasing. This is helping us understand where they go. On the right-hand side is a polygon or a map with polygons that the recreation staff in Jackson created. Those are the areas we're seeing rapid change in, and areas that predominantly dispersed camping and day use. So rapid change in these particular areas. In particular, we're seeing massive increases in use that's overwhelming our infrastructure and our work staff, resulting in impacts to the resource and social conflict. Things like abandoned campfires, food storage violations, human waste, road deterioration, dog issues, noise complaints, and congestion and conflict at trailheads. Winter's the same thing. In winters, we're seeing a little appetite for motorized and non-motorized activities, or conflicts associated with those. We're seeing challenges at trailheads as far as congestion and our inability to plow them appropriately, and also struggles when it comes to ensuring that recreational impacts are not adversely impacting our winter range habitat. So these are pretty Forest Service-centric concepts, but I do think if I gave a color crayon to Chip, he would be able to probably color in some areas in the Grand Teton National Park that he's also experiencing stresses and challenges. I'm also guessing if I gave some color crayons to the community, you could probably identify some infrastructure, such as Highway 22, maybe public services, maybe the service environment, such as hotels and restaurants, where we're also seeing stresses. Some of those were identified earlier today. I'm not highlighting this as necessarily good or bad. Some of this is some of the net results of the rapid change is very positive. But I am highlighting it as an area that we all experience and that we're all dealing with together. I've got 3 points here I want to end on. And they're really kind of how the Forest Service is experiencing this rapid growth. Number one, we are, for the most part, reacting to the change. We're not being too proactive. We're addressing what Susan Clark identifies in one of her publications as type 1 issues. These are issues that are relatively simple to identify and relatively simple to address, but they're not root causes. For instance, we see an increase in food storage violations and we put in bear boxes. We see more abandoned campfires and we install fire rings. We see unsustainable growth of dispersed camping and we identify where you can camp and where you can't camp. Those are all relatively simple issues and very reactionary, and we lack the capacity right now to be more proactive. And I really do feel like we need more engagement and more assistance from the community to move towards a more proactive response. The second is that our capacity to react is diminishing. And I heard this earlier, it's no surprise that like a lot of communities or a lot of entities here in town, housing is a major issue for us. We are struggling to maintain our workforce. Quite often, we are making decisions on what positions will receive housing and what positions will not, and those that do not receive housing most likely will not get filled. And in addition to that, we are making the tough decisions to allow some positions to be work or to be positioned in areas like Afton, Pinedale, Grays River area, Big Piney or Kimmer. Those are our other offices. If we cannot find housing here, we are having folks who work remotely. And I don't think that's where we want to land as a community, to have a workforce that's commuting that far as far as our emergency services go and some of our critical resources. And the last point I'd like to make is that the past is not our future, and I do think we need to think bigger. A lot of these issues that we're dealing with, and that I heard earlier today, not just the Ring of Fire, but all of the issues that we're dealing with, are cross-jurisdictional. They cannot be solved in silos. We truly do need to coordinate better. I believe that in the future we need to commit to things like multi-partner governorship, more robust social engagement, adaptive management, and monitoring that crosses all jurisdictions that informs us so we can make informed decisions. On a positive note, I want to say, though, we do live in an amazing place, and I return to this place because it is so amazing. And I don't want to end on a negative point. I want to point out that we still have an amazing resource here. I think the fundamental question is, what is stewardship of this special place? And when I say special place, I actually include all cross-jurisdictionals, the community, the public lands. What does stewardship of this special place look like in the future? I think that's the fundamental question we see today. Thanks.